Hi, welcome to Valley News Digest. I'm John Gregg, the news editor of the Valley News. We're the daily newspaper in the heart of the Upper Valley. We're based in West Lebanon, have been here since 1952, and cover most of Windsor and Orange counties in Vermont, and Grafton and Sullivan counties in New Hampshire, and statewide issues in both states. You can also read us, of course, on our website, vnews.com. And we're joined today both by our healthcare reporter, Nora Doyle-Burr, and by our night sports editor, David Bailey, who will join us in a minute. But first, Nora, thank you. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. You have been writing about a couple of new healthcare institutions in the Upper Valley, one in New Hampshire, one in Vermont, with some interesting sort of different demographic things going on as well. First, there's the Mascoma Community Health Center off Route 4 in Canaan. Remind us how long they've been there and what they do.
Yeah, sure. So they've been there a couple of years. They were sort of established by the community effort in hopes to fill a need there in the Mascoma Valley. They provide a range of health services, but it's mainly primary care. They also have a dentist, which has been quite popular. They provide care on a sliding fee scale, so it's accessible to a lot of people.
And the feeling was it would be good to have a clinic there right in the heart of the Mascoma Valley so people didn't have to go all the way to Lebanon to APD or Dartmouth-Hitchcock for basic primary care or dental stuff, right? And
yes.
How are they doing? They seem to have a decent utilization, they were saying, right?
Yep, they're climbing. I think they're at about 2,800 patients.
Which, for the population of the Mascoma Valley, that seems like a decent amount. Now, you had a story recently that they are trying to partner with some health clinics in the Lakes region, which isn't that far from Canaan on the if you head east. What are they proposing?
Yeah, so they are looking at working with a group called the Health First Family Care Center that has clinics both in Franklin and Laconia. And that's a federally qualified health center, so that means they have access to some federal funds, some support for employees to pay back loans, like educational loans. So when they come together, if they get approval to do so, they would merge their governance structure, and so do some sort of sharing of back-end services, administrative services.
The Mascoma Clinic would do that with the place in Franklin and Laconia.
Yes.
Yeah, and that would be sort of give them some economies of scale too, right?
Yeah. Yes, I think so.
Yeah, and these federally qualified health centers, I know there's Gifford, I think, is one, right? And there's one in Bellows Falls at an old hospital there. Those, I think, Bernie Sanders and the late Ted Kennedy really sort of got those going.
Yeah.
So you said there's some benefits for patients.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, there definitely are. So I think the federal funds help, rural areas, and I think also inner cities have access to some services that they might not be able to provide otherwise. So, like I said, it's supposed to be sort of a full suite of primary care. So at this point, Mascoma has both dental and primary medical care, but they really want to have behavioral health care, and that is something that Health First has. And so if this partnership goes through, Mascoma would be able to, they would be hiring to provide behavioral health care, so mental health counseling. And then another service that they would add would be a nutritional service. Nutrition's such a big part of a lot of chronic illnesses, diabetes being one. So it helps with preventative care. And it would also help the Health First folks because they have dental care at one of their clinics currently, but not at the other. So if this goes through, they would expand dental care.
Yeah. Well, it's great that they can have a real health center in the heart of the Mascoma Valley. And interestingly, sort of one of the driving forces behind that has been Mike Sampson, the town administrator in Canaan, New Hampshire. Little secret that I just learned recently, he's actually a Vermonter, and years ago he said he helped launch one of the first ones of these in Plainfield, Vermont. So he's got some real experience, it sounds like, in getting these going.
He's definitely he's on the sort of the business side of the volunteer group that's putting this together.
Yep. And I can't remember, does Bradford also have a federally qualified health center? I thought at one point.
Yes,
Clara
so there
Martin.
are a few other, so it's called
Two Rivers, right?
Little Rivers
Rivers, sorry.
and Ammonoosuc is based in Littleton, but they have a facility in Woodsville.
Right.
So there are a couple others.
Sure. So it's a model that seemingly works in some other communities, and they're making a go of it in Canaan. Now, the other thing you have been writing about, another front, but the new assisted living center, 5-story building that's in the heart of downtown White River Junction, known as the Village at White River Junction. There's been some turnover there, and they've had some help from the town of Hartford. What's going on?
Right, yes. So recently the director left, Sandy Conrad, who's a Royalton Select, I guess the chair of the Select Board. She left, and they have a new director now who's employed by this national company that provides sort of management for the facility. It works for local owners here.
They opened, I think, in January. They were going to open last summer.
Right.
There were some delays in construction.
Right.
And they have, I think, 80 units and 89 beds. Is that what you reported?
Yes.
Because some of them are 2-bedroom units.
Yeah.
And they have, so 6 months, 7 months in, 6 months in, they're not even 25% full, right? That's one of their concerns.
Yeah. So, I mean, the owners are optimistic that they will fill up, and sort of once they hit a certain threshold, people will start getting anxious that they won't, the beds will disappear before they can get them. So then things will speed up at a certain threshold. But at this point, things are pretty quiet still.
Yeah. And I think their hope is obviously it would bring seniors in who can walk to Northern Stage and other amenities right in downtown White River.
Yes.
And enjoy that, but also be able to transition to not only assisted living, but then they have a memory care unit,
they
right?
do.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, they have gotten some help from the town, right? There was a loan.
Yeah, so the loan it's sort of a complicated thing where I think it's a federal program administered by the state and then goes through the town. But yes, they got and it was a job creation loan, so they used sort of a portion of it to help pay some of their employees early on.
Right, a community development block grant, I think.
Block grant, correct.
But they say they've paid back what they borrowed from that.
Paid back what they borrowed.
Right.
Yes, something like $250,000. They are, so they're moving forward without using the rest of that.
Right. Now, remind me, though, they also got a tax abatement. Now, how much was this to develop? Was it 20-something million to build this?
It was about $27 million, I think, to construct it. But they said when they came before the Hartford Board of Abatement, they said that they were, struggling because they were having to pay employees before they had enough revenue coming in. So they asked for an abatement of their taxes. The town granted one of about $50,000 out of more than $300,000. They're paid up at this point in terms of their property taxes with the town, and at that Board of Abatement hearing, which I think took place in March, they told the town they weren't coming back again for
ask for more. Right. And their rental rates, now some places like Kendall at Hanover, you have to make a big equity investment.
Yeah.
Other assisted living places, it's a little bit different. This place seems to be what was it, like starting at $8,000 a month or something like that?
Yeah, 8,500 to about 10,500.
Which is a lot of money to live in White River Junction, but there's lots of services, obviously.
There are, yeah. There's, a movie theater, a pub, a dog park, so.
Right. And it sounds like certainly a lot of people in White River are hoping that it ramps up and gets even more, people in, because there are restaurants and stuff that are counting, and people see this as part of the renaissance of downtown, right?
I think so, yeah. And so I talked to, at least one business owner, seems happy to have them. There's still some concerns about parking and pedestrian safety, so those would be here without the village. So those will.
Yeah. Well, and we just had a story today by our colleague Tim Camarado of around the corner, a 5-story apartment building proposed for South Main Street in White River Junction. So there are people interested in investing in downtown, and we'll see how this goes. Well, this is a big project, and thanks, Nora, for joining us and telling us about it.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with David Bailey, our sports editor at night. Welcome back to Valley News Digest. With us now is David Bailey, who has been editing our sports pages at night for an amazing 16 years. David's kind of one of our unsung heroes and puts out a lot of really nice-looking, beautiful sports sections, plus jam-packed with scores. He's got games, people calling in with game scores and stories, and wire stories coming, so it's pretty amazing to watch you put that together sometimes, David. Thank you for joining us. And David also helped put together, as he has in the past, our annual Athletes of the Year section. We're taping this in the last week of June. There's a banquet tonight. Tell us about that section, David. What's in it and why do we do it?
Well, thanks for the praise, John. Nice to be on here. This is our 5th year of doing this. And what we try to do is we honor 2 athletes, 1 male, 1 female, from each of our 17 high schools. It used to be 18, but South Royalton and Wickham merged into White River Valley. Yep. And we honor 2 athletes from each school, and we fill out the section with photos and sports stats. But it's a nice way of honoring our top athletes, and we kind of do it like the U.S. Senate, 2 from each school. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the banquet, they get recognized, and people talk about sort of what they've done a little bit as well, right?
Yeah, we have a big banquet. It's the 5th year we're doing this. Yeah. And Greg Fennell, our sports editor, usually hosts it. And we invite all the athletes to come, and they often bring their friends and their family, and some people get buy out whole tables. Yeah. And and we eat, and then Greg hosts and he interviews, just short interviews with each of the athletes, and gets to tell a couple jokes.
Sure. Well, it's great. You can tell just from the section, too, I mean, that you learn a lot about these athletes and their interests and things they're going on to. And also our photo staff puts a lot of work into it. I was struck just by some of the photographs, which I think we're going to be able to show you. Just you can really see sort of both the personality and the athleticism of some of these athletes from the section.
It's really amazing. And, what we do is we inform the athletes by snail mail. They still do that. They've been selected, and so we bring them into the office and do a portrait with our photographers, Jeff Hansen, Jennifer Houck, James M. Patterson, and Joseph Ressler. Give credit where credit's due. Yeah. And they take a lot of fun poses, and they usually show up wearing a jersey or sometimes their sneakers, and they get a lot of fun, candid shots of them. Like the balls bouncing off the heads, their sneakers tossed in midair, and they really capture the fun side of it.
Sure. Now, how do we pick who they are? I noticed, for instance, the Hartford, the male athlete is Abayomi Lowe, who's a track star. I think he's going on to Brown.
Yeah, he's going to go to Brown University. He was the valedictorian of his senior class. He's going to try to walk onto the track team. He's had a phenomenal record-breaking career. He was one of our easier picks. Yeah. But what happens is that every May, the sports staff gathers. Greg Fennell, Josh Weinrib, Tris Wykes, myself, Adam Boffey, our jack-of-all-trades correspondent. Yeah. And we gather with a couple pizzas and we hash it out. Each of our sports people is assigned a number of schools. Yeah. And they talk to ADs, they talk to coaches, and they add their own personal observations, and then we hash it out over a couple of pizzas, and sometimes the discussions can get pretty intense. It takes a couple hours, but then we usually have a pretty good list when we're done. I think David Corvo, who's a former sports reporter, and he's kind of a jack of all trades too. He also was involved in the process this year. Yeah. And it's so tempting to just look at the leading scores, because we keep stats and everything, and say, well, all right, we'll just take this one, this one, this one. But we always try to keep in mind defense is a big factor as well. We try to find star defenders. And it's, again, based on all-star teams or discussions with coaches. Right. For example, Mascoma had a field hockey player named Belcondi who was chosen primarily for defense. She was part of a field hockey team that shut out 12 opponents this season. Huh. And Rivendell Soccer had a key defender named Jenna Gilbert, and she was also she was the anchor of an outstanding defense. So we try to find the right balance between offense and defense. It's not just the leading scores. We're not like the NHL, where the MVP always seems to go to the big score.
Well, it's important to have, well-rounded athletes. That's part of the thing. It isn't just, offense that counts. And I think, right. I hope this shows, again, you were talking to some of those reporters and editors who contributed to this, that we are covering these sports pretty intensely. So this seems like a nice way to wrap up the season. Now, you have been doing this, as I said, for 16 years. You get a kick out of, you must be reading about some athletes who we covered, as here when they were in high school, who've gone on to college or even into the pro leagues, right? Does that happen?
Oh, yes, absolutely. First of all, it's amazing I've been doing this for 16 years, because I think my boss was in high school at the time, and many of my coworkers were kids or in school. But yeah, it is really amazing. I'll give you a couple examples. My first couple of years here, which was fall of 03, fall of 04, Hanover High had this outstanding girls soccer player from Norwich named Hannah Carney. And that was my first introduction to her. This great soccer player. But then the winter, she was doing this mogul skiing thing, and we report on that as well. And by 2006, she's in her first Olympics. And in 2010, not Hanover, but Vancouver, bam, the big gold medal. Right. She gets the gold medal. She won a bronze in 14 as well. And, she was a soccer player here, and by 2010, she's the biggest news story in the Twin States. But my first introduction to her was as this nice soccer player at Hanover High. Yeah. And here's another one, and this actually predates me by a couple of years, but another one of our unsung heroes in the sports department is Bill Wilkinson, who for about a decade now, he's taken phone calls for us, and he writes up a lot of the roundups that you see in the paper. Comes in at night and shags telephone calls and turns out really, important, short, quick stories about that everyone wants to know. How'd my high school do? How'd my neighbor's son do? That sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah, he's amazing. Daughter. But in his previous life, he was a golfer at Hartford High in the early aughts. And when I think he was a senior at Hartford High, he golfed against Woodstock. And Woodstock High had this little freshman whose aunt was LPGA Hall of Famer Pat Bradley. Huh. And this little freshman eventually moved to Massachusetts, and then went to St. John's University, and had a great career there. And after that, ended up on the PGA Tour. And in 2011, Keegan Bradley wins the PGA Championship, one of the golf's 4 big majors every year, and he's the biggest sports story in America. Yeah. And he's had a very nice career since then. And but Bill remembered him back when he was a freshman at Woodstock High, and as he once said, he was amazing even back then. Well, that's fun. Yeah, there's lots of stories, and hey, readers, pay attention, pour through that Athletes of the Year, and you may be onto someone who 15 years later pops up in national headlines too. Yeah, so. and a lot of athletes don't become superstars, but a lot of them come back here and they become coaches and mentors. White River Valley, which won the baseball championship this year, their head coach was a gentleman named Devin Silly, and about 10, 12 years ago, he was a star baseball player in his own right at South Royalton School, which, of course, is one of the predecessors of White River Valley. Sure. So who knows? He might be coaching. Someone will be a successful head coach in 10 years in his own right. Yeah. No, it's important that we track, and we're glad we're on it, and glad you're helping us get it right and look good in the paper. Thanks. I get a lot of help, trust me. So, well, David, thank you for joining us, and
Viewers, thanks for watching us. We'll hope you'll watch again next month. And also, you can, of course, read us every day in the Valley News. Thank you.